I guess I wanted to start with Seth, because he was the last person I talked to in the group. TV was traditionally a pretty data-poor environment. You had indirect measurements of panels and proxies. They had vague ways of trying to figure out who was watching. Clearly that's changed and is changing. And I'm curious if you could just give people a little snapshot of where the state of knowledge is about who's watching television, what they're doing, and then run that out a little bit and how it's going to look over the next 5 years.
So I think there's two very distinct fundamental changes that are going on in television right now. The first is that, and it's probably the area that people know the most about, is the collection of set-top box data, which is in the United States, there's about 17 million television households where set-top box data is collected. In most cases, it's anonymized and put into large data stores and sold to third parties. I know Google is one of the people who buys large amounts of set-top box data, TRA, and things like that. And that's mostly, I think, to understand the behavior of watching, how people are consuming programs, trying to understand how good Nielsen data was, trying to specifically understand very low-rated networks of which the sample errors previously made it very, very hard to understand viewership, whether there are geographical discrepancies between areas and things like that. So that's one area that's gotten way better, and it's going to grow dramatically. Probably in the next 3 years, there'll be another 20, 25 million households that will start to collect set-top box data. The second area, and this is probably that has a more dramatic effect, is where offline data, or data from other sources, can be used into the television environment to target ads. So for instance, because the cable operators or the satellite operators who you have a relationship with know who you are, they have a billing relationship, they can use that to match, again in an anonymous fashion, against a source of other information. And for advertisers, this is the most important set of data, because advertisers then can use data they have about you to discriminate between one customer and another. And so just an example, AT&T Wireless can run different commercials in a household knowing whether you're an AT&T Wireless customer or not. And for an advertiser, the greatest ROI is selling things to customers, upselling and cross-selling, as opposed to just giving blanket offers.
Now, from a certain point of view, it sounds like you could be evil and say that the idiot child television is finally catching up to the internet stuff. Sean, could you, from the point of view of somebody that does online video, how different is that from the world that you inhabit?
So I think one of the really big differences when you're in an online video world versus the offline is largely the feedback loop. So
that's one of my favorite phrases, by the offline video, which is television, for people who don't know.
Sorry, I'm showing my colors in my my background. But the feedback loop is very different. In the online world, we're getting a one-to-one relationship with each and every single consumer. And that feedback loop is for all senses of the word, instantaneous. We know what each and every consumer is doing as they're doing it and can actually adapt that experience. Moreover, we're getting a lot more data because we get to see it from everybody as opposed to a sample set. And what that allows us to do is really personalize that entire experience.
Do you keep every little bit of everything that anybody does that touches your...
We do. Our company today, we process a few billion events on a daily basis.
What's an event?
Somebody loads up a player, they click, they watch X amount of time, they click on an ad, they leave an ad. We really try and track everything.
And you save it?
Yes, we save it, anonymous.
So how big, what's a rough idea of how much stuff you've got?
Our data store today is about 70 terabytes of data. So this is trillions of
Does anybody have a handy gauge of what that is? I don't even know. Esther, do you...
It's a lot of data.
Okay.
I'd say not Google scale, but a traditional database where a lot of analytic systems have been built is roughly 1,000th the size of what we do today.
And you keep it all forever?
So far, yeah.
Till you run out of storage, right?
Well, we just keep making it bigger and bigger. We'll probably be over 100 terabytes before the end of the year and continue to expand from there.
Now, do you just use that yourselves, or is that available for rent or sale to other parties?
So we never rent, we never sell it. What we use it for is actually for our customers, right? So for ESPN or Bloomberg, it's all their data to actually better assess their monetization strategy. We have a lot of customers, for example.
You keep the data separate for different, or is it all?
Yeah, nobody gets the aggregate data, so they only see, obviously, their silo of data. But the whole goal is to actually help them answer questions around, am I distributing my content to the right?
Would you give a guy a better price if he was willing to let other people use his stuff?
That's really up to them. If they want to share their data, they can. But our whole goal is to help them, for example, figure out if they're running a paywall for their piece of content. Should that paywall be at 2 minutes, or should it be at 5 minutes? Or if they're monetizing with ads, should they run 1 pre-roll ad versus 3 in-stream ads?
Stephan, I mean, from the point of view, you're providing a more broad service. It's not just you do display, you do video, mobile. How do these different worlds look from your perspective in terms of the degree to which data is available and or unavailable, and also particularly, and now I think I didn't mention it, but I think you're the head of the IAB's policy committee in Europe. So I'd like to get a little bit into the policy aspects of this and whether anything either of these guys have just said is red flag stuff for regulators or somebody.
Yeah, sure. So talking about data being available for online media, so I won't talk about offline video, Excellent term. But where there is roughly, has been no data available or only very limited. For online media, there is tons of data, and it's increasing drastically. So we have just started, to make it fluid and make it available in machines, make it available for delivering ads and feeding algorithms and stuff like that. So we're just in the beginning. But when you look at it from an advertiser's point of view, so for example, we're working for brand L'Oreal. We're doing we're optimizing a lot of campaigns for them. They do care a lot about data and stuff like that, but at the end of the day, they do care for one simple question. How many ads does a client, a user, has to see until he thinks about buying a product, or when does he start liking the product, and when does it go down again? And the exciting thing about online media is that we can measure everything. So he runs a campaign, and we can come back and say, well, actually, it's between 4 and 5 contacts. You have the optimum, where people are, the liking of your brand and your product is increasing until 4 or 5, and then it goes down again. You never saw something like that in any other media because of technical reasons, obviously, it's not possible.
Now, do you then turn around and go after the guys that it only took, I'm assuming that 4 or 5 is an average, and some people it's 1 and other people it's 8. Are you going to turn around and go for the guy who was the one, use a different campaign for the easy guy who was already your seemingly good customer, and maybe forget about the guy that not even bother trying to get the guy who took 8? Or
that's a very good question, because once more, we're just on a starting point. So when you look at the creation, the number of ads we have available, and you compare it to the number of informations and the data points we have available, you can start crying, because pretty often, we know tons of information about a user. So if someone clicks and is being connected with our system, we have
by tons. Just give me an example of. In other words, across all of his activities across many websites and
exactly.
media, you can
usually,
consolidate all that.
Yeah, usually we have a reach of somewhere between 70 and 90% of all cookies in the country where we operate, where we collect some kind of browsing history. And we apply up to 70 statistical models every time he clicks somewhere. So we know a lot, obviously,
So
about
how many terabytes have you got?
Many terabytes. In fact, the whole information is sitting in a cookie on the user's computer, so this is far away from a terabyte, but of course we're collecting it for statistical
But you have a
reasons.
copy as well.
Yeah, we have a copy because we have to feed and train our algorithms. But what I wanted to say,
So it's great, so if your system goes down, you don't have to worry about it, you can
Exactly.
just call it all back from
Exactly, there's no call to the database at all, it's just the user's system feeds into the algorithm. So if he deletes cookie, he's away from our system. But the problem is, we know a lot, and I think all the other guys as well, have a lot of information, what could be shown to user, what would be relevant for him. But sometimes we have 3 different creatives, where we can make a choice. That's the reality in the digital ecosystem right now. And what you are mentioning would be a system where we would have tons of variables feeding into intelligent creatives. That's simply not there right now.
Are people working? I mean, presumably people are working on that.
Absolutely. There are people, we saw this amazing stuff from Yahoo, for example, where they have the personalized ads engine, and some other companies are working on that. But it's not there at large scale. So the typical campaign is, a number of creatives are being sent out. You can be lucky if they're not sent by fax, or then they're sent by email.
So it's still fairly traditional, 18 to 34 males in southern Germany at dinner time on Tuesday.
Yeah, and you optimize 3 different formats or something like that.
It's interesting because that is there on some linear television.
I was going to say,
yeah. So the idiot box is.
So in fact, the internet isn't as smart as people think it is.
Or maybe TV's gotten smarter.
Esther.
But the real magic of this is that there's a market. So, look at this lady who may or may not buy your hair coloring after 8 ads. But if we know enough about her, she may actually book a trip to Paris after 3 ads. And so it's not simply the value of the person in one context. It's finding the right context for that person. And in which context, to what advertiser is this lady worth the most? And then you can sell her to the highest bidder, and she's also more likely to be satisfied because she didn't want the hair coloring in the first place, but she is looking for a trip to Paris. And the challenge is to do that on a massive scale in real time across all these different advertisers. And everybody's goal is to raise the price of advertising because it's more valuable.
Well, that was going to be, okay, go ahead, will you jump in?
Sure. Well, I was going to say that kind of goes back to the old adage of 50% of my advertising dollars are working. I just don't know which 50%. And the whole goal is to actually
that gets right to Kirby. I mean, one of the things you guys are a bit sort of the skeptics of this crowd.
Yeah, I mean, I guess, terabytes of data are a great thing. But, I just got out of a meeting last week with the chief digital officer of a major holding company ad agency. And he said, Kirby, can you help me devise some new metrics for my brand advertisers? I said, well, sure. What are they looking at now? And he said, they optimize to clicks. Major CPG selling cereal is optimizing to clicks, which is ludicrous in this day and age.
Unpack why that's a bad idea.
Given the amount of data that we all know is available and that we've all just discussed is so relevant
back to
and useful.
the internet's not as smart as we think.
The internet's really smart. The systems that are being used by brands and buyers to purchase and measure the effectiveness of their advertising are not smart enough.
Is that just a matter of time?
It's a matter of time in terms of the time available to a media planner. So I sat down again with an ad ops leader at a big agency at the IAB earlier this week, and she said, oh, no, we have all the data we need. She said, Kirby, I know what drives offline sales lift and which audiences I'm reaching, and you're telling me now which ads are viewable or not. She says, but by the time, my planners are too busy planning and buying because they're using, by and large, the eBiz isn't happening yet. And hopefully Donovan and MediaBank merge in that we get less friction in the buying and billing and back office systems. But by and large, ads are planned, bought, and sold by media planners using 5 different Excel spreadsheets, cutting and pasting CPMs off rate cards, and then mapping it against.
So the internet is
comScore
smart.
data.
It's the media buyers that are dumb.
It's a very inefficient system right now, and the technology needs to jump to a place where it can make those decisions on the behalf of people. And I think that's what we were talking about a little earlier.
Well, there is one thing I want to say regarding this counting clicks is clearly not working for brand advertisers. There's a very good research, especially from comScore, that shows that clicks simply don't work for them, and it's quite plain why not. But the disappointing thing for us here in the room, now we think we are the digital innovators. We have to come with something exciting new, and some algorithmic data-driven something to go back to those clients and tell them now we have the KPI you were looking for. It's amazing. It feeds into terabytes of data feeding in and so on. But the true fact is, and I guess that's what you experienced with that client as well, L'Oreal, for example, they care about sympathy, awareness, and purchase intent. Very classical dimensions, you know, guys studying marketing learned that over the past 50 years. That's still valid, you know. If you want to make people run into a shop and buy the hair coloration product, story can be easily told, you know. So we have to kind of get back to some classical measures, get smart in terms of being not too innovative, be not too technical focused, but offering them something that they know they learned in their television, their offline video business.
Let me just jump in. We see agencies who tell us they believe in taking the 3 to 6 months to do the offline sales lift or the attitudinal brand study, but the brand, the buyer, is telling them, wait a minute, go optimize over, the click rate's too low. There's one of the clients is a big financial services company, and they literally pulled a buy off of Forbes.com because the click rate wasn't high enough. Because people weren't going to sign up for private wealth management on the internet. Well, it doesn't make any sense.
I'm glad you brought up Forbes because, I mean, there's another side of this. You know, there's the kind of publisher side of this whole thing. And one of the curious things, you know, for instance, I mean, obviously a very good way to figure out who somebody is to look at what they're reading. And many countries around the world, for instance, have laws even against, say, going to the public library and asking what books X person has taken out or whatever. On the internet, we haven't really figured this one out yet, and so the result is that, say, Sean at Ooyala, I mean, you want to know the reading habits of somebody, you'd be a pretty good place to start asking.
Right. I mean, the information is absolutely there. Where not only do we see what videos you're watching, but we see the exact point in time when you stopped watching that video, or when we gave you an ad and you either clicked or
which
you didn't.
article in the newspaper you read, and
exactly. So the wealth of information is clearly there, and I think that puts an onus on both the technology providers as well as the publishers to actually use that.
Is there any regulatory control of any kind over you guys holding that information?
There's a lot of control around essentially holding personally identifiable.
Is it state of California, or who's the governing body in the case of the U.S.?
Different regions. Europe has different regulations. Different states within the United States actually have different regulations.
So have you got like a compliance guy that deals with this? And is that a nightmare job, or is it a?
It puts in a few extra speed bumps. Yes.
I mean, Stephan. I mean, in Europe, this is a big deal, or is it seeming? Yes. It seems like it's getting. I mean, it kind of comes up out of nowhere, and the guy in Hamburg starts saying things, and then he goes away.
Or Vivian Redding most recently, just this week.
Yeah, absolutely.
And then it kind of goes away. I mean, give us a feeling for where the.
Yeah, in Europe, you know, we're currently in a pretty messy situation, unfortunately, because you know they brought out this e-privacy directive. I think many of you might be aware of that, which tries to force the industry to go towards getting more consent more explicitly from the users before placing a cookie or something on his computer and tracking him or her. And there is a lot of ambiguity and unclarity, you know, what that exactly means. Do they want to go opt-in, which would kill large parts of the industry? Or do they want to support a system where the industry cares more, adds more transparency, more control to the game, and especially, you know, makes a distinction between whether I have some kind of, you know, tracking data, some pretty much anonymous data, someone clicked 7 times here and 5 times there, or whether I have his, you know, credit card information, some personal identifiable information. There's a lot of, you know, weird discussions going on. A lot of those Hamburg guys jumping in and trying to, you know, play their game, kind of.
You're suggesting it's a game?
On the other hand, I must say, you know, there is a true source for this as well, because users do care a lot more for privacy and what data is being tracked and what is going on. You know, if you go to a page, a news page, and you get 50 or 70 cookies dropped on your computer, that's something that scares users. So the industry has not been very good in, you know, giving transparency to that.
Seth, in the U.S. at least, is the television world regulated on this? I mean.
Well, the cable, there's something called the Cable Privacy Act, and that's been the blanket for how the cable operators
and what does that do?
Use that information. It means that they are not allowed to sort of give the information out to third parties. It covers the type of information that they keep and things like that. But what's sort of interesting is, and you see this both on linear television, TV, everywhere, both of those require a degree of opt-in. When you sort of sign into TV Everywhere, which is, in the US, it's an initiative to allow people to watch sort of traditional linear programming on an iPad or on a web browser.
HBO Go or...
Exactly, things like that. You're essentially opting in every time you authenticate. And what that means is an interesting thing. It means that they actually know who you are. So they're not guessing who you are, they know who you are. And as I said, that opens up a font of different types of information, and it's not as much about tracking whether you watch this or whether you watch that, because for a lot of advertisers, that's just not meaningful for what they're going to do. You know, if you're Dell and you want to sell someone a laptop, the most meaningful thing is, have they bought something from Dell before, and when's the last time they bought a laptop? And that's only available from other sources. And so it's a different relationship. It's a relationship.
But it is in fact available, interestingly.
It is in fact information. Look, in the United States, in most states, your car registration information is available, your household, whether you have a mortgage, which you own a house. So those are very primary sources of information about people that advertisers use as well as their own information. Credit card information is different. I mean, the credit card company uses that, and the individual companies use the sort of abstractions. But
can Dell use that to figure out who bought a Dell computer by looking at?
Well,
Dell's not a good example.
But here's the one thing, just remember, I just want to say one thing, and that because they don't actually say Spencer bought a Dell. What they do say is this person is in a category of someone who bought a computer, and then the fact that it was Spencer and things like that is eradicated. So that what they know is this authenticated stream is going to a household that just bought a computer. Therefore, let's tell them cloud storage or something like that, as opposed to it's Spencer. I'm sorry.
No, it's okay. I interrupted you. But what's really going on now is very different. People are going onto Facebook and friending Dell. They're tweeting what they bought. They're publishing wish lists. I mean, it's terabytes and more of data that's right now not really being parsed properly.
I was going to say, is that getting sucked into the system?
Not yet, but it will be. And it's much more interesting because people are volunteering
a big part of Facebook's valuation, isn't
They're
it?
excited, yes, and Twitter's and everybody else's. And now you're going to get applications. There's applications where people post wish lists.
Yeah, in fact, I mean, from a certain point of view, Facebook is basically just a giant machine to collect data.
Yeah.
Every RFP I see now has, and how do you incorporate social data into it? No one knows.
And I mean, that's exactly what we did.
And, the tragedy of Google is that Google has to only infer things from looking at them, whereas
they're
Facebook... They're
doing fine, thank you.
But no, but I mean, but
yeah,
it's
long
a big
run,
week.
you're
No,
right.
but they infer,
Yeah.
and Facebook has you telling them,
Right.
now you could lie to Facebook. I guess Facebook is more subject to being gamed, but...
Yeah, I mean, the problem with Facebook is people don't go to Facebook to buy stuff. They go to Facebook to promote themselves. And sometimes they promote the stuff they own or the stuff they like. Whereas when they go to the search box, if it's for a product, chances are they have some interest in buying that product. So it's two very different approaches. Both of them are valid. The Facebook and social media user-generated data one is much more complicated, but ultimately just as interesting.
And that's why I'd say, so Google actually gives you, they get intent. It's actually an easier thing to monetize, whereas Facebook has to, they do.
Sometimes.
On search.
Yeah.
Because I, as a consumer, I'm actually telling you, as best as I can articulate, what I'm looking for.
Yeah, but if you just want to like sell potato chips,
sure, then it's
Google's
more
not
of
much use.
No, that's where you want Molo So, because the guy's in the store, and you tell him crispy whatever's is around the corner in the store, and we'll give you 10 cents off or 20 cents off if you buy it with a Coke.
Got it. And you want to remember that he was there so that when he comes back the second time, you can give him even better
this is his
offer.
favorite brand.
And you want to know which display ads banners did he see during which period of time on which types of websites, because that matters too, right? I mean, that's going to tie. That's an influencer.
It's getting pretty
it's
spooky.
Absolutely
kids,
about upper funnel.
It's getting spooky. I mean, usually I'm being polite. The creepy is the word that usually gets used, but I'll call it spooky just to be nice. I mean, are we getting into spooky land here with some of this stuff?
We can predict what you're going to eat for lunch better than you can.
Right. Is that, I mean, do we need to worry about the fact that that's weird, or just forget about it?
I think it is weird, but it's a very imbalanced relationship right now. The consumers are giving us all of their data, yet we're still very early on and actually providing value back to them. Right. For example, the vast majority of people still watch their their video content on the TV experience. And it's
Poorer
a
people.
linear programming experience that's exactly the same for all of us when we watch the same channel. And then there's no personalization in small amounts. And so we're still very early on in actually helping.
Well, Seth's
create
working on
these.
personalization by at least personalizing the ads.
Right, and so over the next few years, I think we're going to see a large wave of products and features and capabilities that are actually going to start to leverage this data and provide a lot more value back to the consumer. And then that relationship, I think, becomes more balanced.
And the other thing that really needs to change is that they understand better what's going on. Because it's spooky if you don't know about it. If you do know about it, you can have the experience you want and not have the personalization you don't want.
Right.
And I think there's one thing we shouldn't forget in all that is that users love sharing their data because this whole idea of sharing comes with data as well. And checking into your Foursquare account that you're here in the Monte Carlo Bay or something like that is nothing else than sharing data. Because
As opposed to when you're in the Holiday Inn.
promotion thing, and people, like it. They get value. It makes fun, and that's the reason why they give all the data to Facebook. Not because they don't know, they know it. They go there because they get a valued service based on their data. Of course, it has to be more transparent and more under control. But we shouldn't forget that people like this.
There was an interesting irony about checking, and I don't know if anyone else noticed, if you use the internet available in this, it thought you were located in Athens, Greece.
Excellent.
And the
WPP
closest thing to check into actually was the Stream conference.
Excellent, excellent. This is spooky, you see.
That is
spooky.
very
Hi,
So maybe that
Hi.
was,
That's funny, not spooky.